I'm very honored to wear this badge again and be back at Hustef. You all made it. Having a good show? Yeah? Wonderful. Fist zip. That's good. Lovely. There's so many great talks, so I understand that you had a very tough choice, but you came to the right talk. This is going to be actionable, and you weren't scared away by the dev in the title. So we're going to have some fun today, and I'm sure you're going to take some things home with you. Now, I always like to put my face as big as possible on the slide, and I did. It's me. I'm speaking here, Martijn Goossens, 40 rotations around the sun, roughly. I also am part of the program committee this year, so I'm very proud of this lovely venue, this lovely audience, and the lovely speakers that make this event a great place. Music, I submitted my most favorite song to our radio DJ and speaker, Steve Watson, and it was played over the radio a few times yesterday, so that was pretty cool. Thanks again, Steve. I've been in this industry for 20 years, and we're going to do a short history lesson of me, but also about DevEx over the few next slides, and I want to take you on a journey because we need to cover some background why you are sitting here and why you want to take away from this presentation to your company. It's going to be cool, and I think I'm going to help you. So we'll cover some history. I'll talk about what DevEx is. How many of you know what DevEx is? 3 people. Okay, I've got some ground to cover. That's great. I've brought some history lessons, some fact sheets, and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, we're going to talk about DORA, which is one of the main frameworks in the DevEx space. And what our role as QA is when we talk about those metrics and how and why they matter to us as QA. Some final thoughts, and then we do a Q&A. I'll be back there in the speaker's corner if you have any questions afterwards, and find me around the venue. So, as promised, the history lesson. Looking at Tariq's keynote yesterday morning, I was like, his slide setup is very similar to mine. And did he copy me or am I copying him? I don't know, but it's probably a sign that this is going to be a very great presentation. Trust me. So, in 2004, just last year, there was a big article saying that amongst a couple of other things, developer experience, DevEx, was one of the top trends that we need to know about that's happening in the developer and software delivery space. Now, big trends are super important, and that's why you are here at a conference, to learn stuff and know what our industry is doing and why it's important to us. This is me, very, very long ago. More hair here. First presentation ever in lovely Kiev. This is where I first learned about the term developer experience. And I was still fairly young in my career as a tester, but everything in those metrics and everything that DevEx claimed to want to do rang a bell with me as a young tester, and I was like, I'm doing a lot of this stuff. But why is this called developer experience? Why is it not called QA experience or software delivery experience? It made me wonder, and it kept me busy, but you know, we all have very busy lives, so I didn't really dive into it, looked into it, until a few years later. Another young photo of me. Told you it was going to be fun. This is my first talk at Hustef. I was working at a company called Xebia, and Xebia had an entry exam where they asked questions about what is your experience, how do you look at software delivery as a QA, but also in a holistic way, because we're helping software delivery companies and products do better stuff. We're not just focusing on testing or test automation, we're doing the whole thing. What do you know about the latest DevOps report? I'm like, I know the latest state of DevOps because I read the report that comes out every year by Google, and I knew that these metrics were still around. We were now reporting on them. There was tooling, graphs, and all kinds of cool stuff, and people were making more of a buzz about it. I, as a tester, found this very interesting, but I had a very busy life, so I didn't really dive into it. Fast forward to last year, and I had a role in a small Dutch startup. They deliver groceries, and it's all online, so they don't have any physical stores. They're an online-first, software-focused company. And they had a team full of DevEx coaches. So things are becoming very serious. DevEx is now a role next to all the developers and testers, and they're focusing on how to deliver their product, the value of products. We've heard that by Goiko, we heard it by Rob, how to deliver that and how to help your company do things better in a measured way. Because if we measure and track things, like Goiko said, I think we can learn from that, adapt, and improve our work, but also be more valuable as a tester in the age of AI, Tariq. So DevEx coaches, I fell into the role of a DevEx coach, but me, with 20 years of history and experience in QA, I did things my way, the QA way. And that's sort of where I want to talk to you about today, because where are your opportunities when we talk about developer experience? So is your company already working with DevEx? Like there's 6 hands that showed up when I asked this. So not a lot of people are already doing DevEx or are familiar with it. That's fine. We'll work on that in this presentation, or if you're watching this at home, looking at you. Are you stuck convincing your developers about QA? Testing is still, in some companies, an oversight, an afterthought. Just like in Picnic, they desperately need quality, but they had very few testers. Me, as a QA in disguise DevEx coach, I had to help them. So maybe this is also where you can sort of switch your role while still doing the things that you love to do. Are you looking to make your QA victories more relevant? Because as we also saw, we need to report on the value that we do and deliver for our companies, because it's becoming more and more hard to fight against everything that AI is offering, and why our human experience and human intelligence is more important. So we need to measure things and show things in reports, because people like graphs. And lastly, are you coding in your QA job? You might actually have a developer experience, right? Because ultimately, it's all about delivering that quality, the value, and making sure that your company is doing the right stuff. That's what we're helping for, right? That's why we are QA and doing the things that we love. Because I think that it's all about a holistic quality mindset. Being zen and not worrying about production issues. So we shouldn't be the last line of defense when it comes to production issues, bugs, and that kind of stuff. The whole team needs to know about it, and we need to measure it. DevEx is one of those themes where developers pick up their ears and are like, hey, this is for me. Somebody cares about me. Somebody wants to know how I am doing, how I'm performing, and what that brings and gives to the company. Now we need to jump on that, because it's super cool and important, if that wagon is already leaving the station, to jump on board and make ourselves and our roles more important. Now, only 6 people know what DevEx actually means. So let's find out what DevEx actually means. This is where we start the history lesson of developer experience. And the developer experience history sort of starts in 2010. Somebody on Twitter had a very thought-provoking thought, and they said, hey, DX, developer experience. Because developers, in a way, are users too. Well, that's super cool. Algorithms are us. But that didn't start a movement. Now, in 2011, UX Magazine, one of the leading online blogs about user experience, actually blogged about how they got into developer experience. That they saw a trend happen that was not focusing externally on users, but internal users of software delivery. So the people making cool designs are now suddenly worried or caring about our developers? 2012, a lot of people came together, but 2 people wrote this paper, The Developer Experience Concept and Definition. It's a very long paper. It's widely and freely available to everybody who wants to dive into that text. But I have 2 excerpts from that I want to share with you today, because they compare user experience with developer experience, and I thought that was pretty interesting and will help you get on board on what developer experience actually means to your company if you want to dive into this. So, defining the user experience in that paper, The definition goes as next. The user experience is a concept that captures how persons feel about products, systems, and services. It evolves from disciplines, so as interaction design, usability, to a much richer scope that includes feelings, motivations, satisfaction. Remember those experiences that Tariq was talking about yesterday? We could be testing that. Now, looking at the developer experience, making the parallel between that external-facing user experience, they say, similarly, developer experience could be defined as a means for capturing how developers think and feel about their activities within working in their working environments, with the assumptions that an important part of the developer experience has positive impacts on characteristics as sustained team and project performance. Value, I think. So if a developer is happy doing their job, if there's less friction, then ideally there's faster software releases, less bugs. Now, again, there's a lot of developer, and you're still not walking away, so that's a good sign. But I think that we as QA are looking and staring at these types of screens more and more often. Again, aren't we the developers in this story? So you also have an experience developing code for your clients, code to support the code. And I think our developer experience can also be measured in the metrics that we're going to cover next. So, as I mentioned, there's a couple of frameworks inside of DevEx, and the main one is DORA. So let's explore what DORA actually means. Click. There we go. DORA. So DORA is DORA metrics. In 2014, so after that paper was written, 2 years later, a startup created the DORA metrics. If you Google for or search for the DORA metrics now, everybody's going to say that the DORA metrics is owned by Google. That's true. In 2018, it was acquired by Google, and in that same year, Google added it to their yearly State of DevOps report. Instead of just measuring on what DevOps was doing, they actually had some metrics that they could report on, which made things more tangible and helped people to increase those metrics, which is useful. So, DORA stands for the DevOps Research and Assessment. It's actually an acronym. You don't have to remember that because DORA is widely indexed by Google nowadays, so if you look for DORA and the DORA metrics, you will not find the lovely cartoon character, but more like reports about DevOps performance. Now, you might be wondering, what are then these metrics? So these are the 4 DORA metrics: deployment frequency, lead time for change, change fail rate, and mean time to recovery. And some of these you might already feel familiar with. A change fail rate is something where my QA ears perked up. And I'm like, that's super important to me, my job, and everything that we do as QA. Mean time to recovery is also important because if there's a production issue, we need to debug and be able to recover fast. We might also do that with a backup or, roll back to the latest version. So there's a lot of cool things that we can do in our jobs that I thought that these metrics, when I read about them in 2016 for the first time, I was like, this is interesting for me. I want to make my work more significant, more seen, more pragmatic for the company. So that's why I dove into this. And I dove into this hard. Because I sort of cross-checked all the things that we do as QA with those DORA metrics. So for reference, deployment frequency, lead time for change, change failure rate, and mean time to recovery. And if we look at test automation, I think test automation is a perfect example of how we can affect all those metrics with, for example, the test automation pyramid. Because the faster our tests run, the faster we have a deployment frequency. The faster we can recover, but also our change failure rate with a good coverage in the test automation pyramid is very super important. Quality gates will help, parallel execution, but also things like test practices. If we talk about test coverage, test planning, but also shift left and requirements analysis, we can help and reduce the change failure rate, for example. But if we know what our requirements are for non-functional things, then we can also speed up the change failure rate. Shift right, as you can see, is very closely related to the mean time to recover. Everything on the right side of the software delivery process sort of is very much tied to that mean time to recovery, anything from code to production. And lastly, when we look at non-functional testing, I think that's very closely related to change failure rate. It's basically the types of testing that we do to make sure that quality is actually ingrained in the product and that we don't have to work on Saturday. So, Martijn, what is then the role for QA in DevEx? I'm glad you asked. That's not me, by the way. That's what ChatGPT thinks I look like. So, let's dive into it. We have 4 metrics, and I will spend the next 8 minutes to dive deeper with you on how a software delivery team, but most importantly, you, can impact all of these metrics. Deployment frequency is a business goal, because as soon as we can deliver more value more fast, as Rob said yesterday, I think that's important for a company. It makes development more flexible, so developers are happy, but also the operations team or maintenance team doesn't have to wake up in the afternoon because we can roll back easily. Deployment frequency is a super big target, and I hope you all agree. Yes? You're awake. That's good. So deployment frequency. I already mentioned a few things that we do in our day-to-day jobs that I think aims to improve deployment frequency. And it might be an implicit thought, but parallel execution, for example, helps to cut down on pipeline runs and make sure that we actually have faster deployments. Deployments that matter, but also deployments that we can trust. So test coverage is also important. We need to know about risk, but also value-based testing, so we're not testing too much and not delaying the process of testing when we actually are aiming to increase this deployment frequency. As was mentioned and highlighted yesterday, and I fully agree with Rob, we don't have to deploy every 5 minutes. That's not necessarily a target for your company. So, find out what the target metric is for you, but at least when you are inspecting this, you can report on this and try to discuss it, see what the value is in this specific metric, and then think about your role and the things that you do in your job that delay this metric, or maybe things that you do that are actually helping this metric. Check in on this metric again in like a quarter or like half a year, and then you report back, hey, we did significantly better, and you should be proud of us. Don't fire me, please, because I'm not AI, I actually did stuff. So next is the lead time for changes. When a product owner comes in with a nice pink sticky and says, I want this feature done tomorrow, you say, well, we have a very nice deployment frequency, but what is now our lead time for change? Because taking on a new piece of work, as Agile would describe it, there is a whole chain, because first it needs to be refined, and then we need to take it into the sprint, and our sprint takes 4 weeks, or maybe 3, hopefully 2. And then after the sprint, we say, well, we actually need more time because we didn't get to testing in the sprint. And now suddenly we're in sprint 2. The lead time for change is only ever increasing, and we need to help that. How can we help that? By continuous testing. If we start testing from the moment that something is created, if we shift left our testing and help with the requirements analysis, we don't have to do extensive testing at the end. We can help our developers write code faster, and with free Amigo practices, we can actually help everybody align so that testing is done on all the right levels and all the right systems, and we can, deploy with trust and speed because we fixed our deployment frequency. So lead time for changes is important for the business, but it should also be a target for us as QA as much as a whole development team. So the third metric that we will cover is the change fail rate. And as a QA, I feel very, very intrinsically motivated to get the change fail rate down. But here's the problem. In most companies that I've been in, we don't really report on this. And as mentioned yesterday, people and businesses who report on production issues might have a snake problem in India. If you say you want less bugs on production, the best thing to do is never release and hire less developers. But that's not really what you want as a company. You want to be flexible. You want to be delivering new value to your customers. You want to keep retention and flexibility in your company. So, hey, we need to break some stuff. But let's do it safely. Let's make sure that we cover our risks, our value-based testing, and change fail rate. I still want to find all the bugs, but maybe we can fix them faster if we have the right reporting, if we have the right logging, as we saw in Goiko's talk. And we can help with this change fail rate next to what we're already doing. Yes, we're finding bugs, but ultimately we want to have them resolved and be smaller because we have good alignment with shift left and requirements analysis. So this change fail rate is super interesting. But lastly, and I think more interestingly, is our mean time to recover, because in the end, something will go wrong. It's just life, right? We had a presentation here yesterday, technical issues. Something will go wrong. So you need to be accountable and responsible that you actually test this. What will happen if your system falls over tomorrow? Have you tested this? Do you have a backup plan? Do you do Git repositories, and can you go back into time? Can you help yourself not work in the weekends or do overtime when stuff hits the fan, if the server's on fire, right? So this mean time to recovery is all about accident management. It is going to happen if you don't test for it, if you don't try it, train it, then the mean time to recovery will take long. This is only one part of recovery, right? Because when we find a bug and our systems and processes and our timelines and our test automation is all slow, and we need to wait 2 weeks before we have a release cycle, and our deployment frequencies are low, then your mean time to recovery is always going to suffer. So how you tackle this problem is very specific to your company. There's many ways to do this. But since we are reporting on this, you can actually find friends and allies to combat this and talk about the value of this before it actually is too late. So mean time to recovery is an interesting metric to report on, but in my opinion, I think it's on the last priority and rightfully on the last slot of the metrics. So let's check in and why you can take this home with you, right? So is your company working with DevEx? Then maybe use some of these slides as inspiration and cross-reference it on where quality can be found in these metrics, how you will do your job and actively have the facts to show it. So are you stuck convincing developers about QA? There is this cool trend going on. It's the hottest trend in 2024 and probably this year too. So if you want your developer friends to be more interested in change failure rate, which is not super sexy, we can start reporting on it and show the value to your company, to your developers, and see how we are allies and help with this. Are you looking to make the QA victories more relevant? We certainly have metrics to show it. And lastly, are you coding in your QA job? Then many of these things can also be related to that. Now, before I go to the main takeaways, I brought a musical instrument. Because DevEx is a trend in the software industry, and we as QA can jump on it so we can make sure that our jobs are safe and relevant, but also shown and practically visible. DevEx can be used for QA development too. So if you're releasing your QA automation in a very slow process, then that might be hindering some of the other processes. It might hinder your experience, and you should also actively work towards it. The QA conversation with developers can be renewed with this DevEx team. I didn't talk about SPACE today. Anybody know what SPACE is? And I'm not talking about the thing up there. There's another framework, competing framework by Microsoft, and it sort of extends everything that I've said with DORA, but sort of more looks like the touchy-feely things for developers. That's why I didn't bring it today. because I think this is more practical for us as QA. Your manager might like your accomplishments in DevEx metrics. And lastly, there are other cool things in the world and this talk, because other things might be AI, but this is very practical to what we do every day. So thank you for being here. There's many great talks. I had a blast, and I hope you did too.
Thank you so much. Do you see these wonderful smiling faces over there? They really support you.
Big supporters.
Really
Thank you.
It means a lot from up here, I think. Yeah. Are you ready for the questions? All right. I love this one, actually. It's very interesting. If you start measuring quality, doesn't it become quantity?
It might be, and that's why I also sort of highlighted the snake dilemma. If you, there's this story where in India that someone said, hey, cobras, we need to fix the cobra problem, so we're going to give everybody $100 if they find a cobra and kill it. And then people started breeding cobras because we were looking for quantities. Now, this is where the talk about value comes back in, because we need to talk about why it's important to fix these things instead of starting measuring things. We're not looking for quantities. We're making sure that we have the information, the insights.
Okay, thank you. Is DevEx concerned more with the developer's perception of the development environment rather than their experience of their product?
I think that's an interesting question, because ultimately being able to deliver faster doesn't really say about the value or quality that you're building in. However, it needs to work together, because if you have a brilliant idea but your deployment frequency is super low, then you're still not doing the cool stuff that you want to do. So it needs to work in tandem, and people need to understand the value of what they're doing next to how are we doing this, and this is more on the how.
Okay, thank you. With the recent fuss around AI, do you think QA is slowly evolving to QE? How will it affect DevEx, in your opinion? And, oh, sorry, it's
highlighted.
Where did it go? Okay, and will we see better metrics results? Don't vote while I'm reading the question, guys. Come on.
I think it's the top one, right?
No, it's actually, I started with this one, but people started voting. I know I asked you to vote, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
So with the recent fuss around AI, QA slowly turning into QE, and how will it affect DevEx, in your opinion? And will we see better metric results? That's it.
Yeah. And now it's jumping around. There we go. Yeah, so I do think our role as QA is evolving, and I was very much inspired by Tariq's talk and the three sort of dimensions that we can grow towards, because ultimately, if you think about it, I'm not sure when, I don't have a glass ball, but I think that anything software will ultimately be written and deployed and tested by code, with somewhere in that sort of hemisphere, the human intelligence. So our role as quality engineers, coaches, evangelists, I don't know what kind of cool roles that we will develop in the next years, but measuring things and having information is something that we have always done. As somebody already said, the bugs are already there. We're just here to find them. Same with these metrics. The metrics are already here, but nobody's looking at them typically.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell some real-life examples of what we can evolve into test? I think that's strategy, because I don't really know that strategy word, as action for making these points better.
Yeah, so the easiest one to start with is change failure rate. If you keep very adamant about finding bugs and not trying to reduce them by not finding them, if you just report on production issues, which is very easy to do and less ambiguous, because the users actually report, 4-star ratings, 1-star ratings. We need to do something with that, and also it will help to change our mindset. For example, with test automation, if your test automation is slow, has waits, doesn't do parallel execution, you will easily run into problems. But now, how can you sell it to somebody that we need to fix it and that we need to spend time on it? If you bring some of these metrics like deployment frequency and change failure rate, that's a one way to go, and this is why this might be a tool for you to help this discussion.
Okay, we need to be quick now. When the devs don't exercise DevEx, do you think we can still focus on it from a quality perspective, so a QAX?
QAX, or I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, me neither.
No, it's cool. we always have had metrics. I just think that this trend, which is scientifically studied and it's going to be a hype and we don't have to sell it, let's jump on that wagon before we sort of invent something new. As I mentioned, I think we've always had metrics, but now it's cool and interesting to other people to bring them on board. So yeah, maybe it's cool. Maybe I'm back next year with a QuaX talk.
QuaX. Thank you so much. You're such an amazing guy. Huge applause for Martijn, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.